Hello, hello. It's Justin Colletti of SonicScoop. Thanks for joining me for this week's episode of the SonicScoop podcast. And today, we're going to be analyzing the mix to the song that has been on the Billboard 100 charts longer than any other song in the history of songs. This song has been on the Billboard charts, I think, for 91 weeks. And it also, this is an interesting fact about this song, it took longer to become a number one hit than any other song in the history of the Billboard charts. This song is a track by Glass Animals called Heat Waves. It is huge with 3 billion streams on it. And this is a track that comes from a band that maybe some people would consider a one-hit wonder if they're not familiar with them, because it's their only track that is anywhere near this successful. However, they're actually a band that has had a number of relatively significant records and have their own fan base. They have their own following. They're known as a bit of a slightly hipstery, artsy kind of alternative pop group. But this song just tore up the charts. I think it's, is it in the top 20 of the most streamed songs ever on Spotify? Here's my list of the top 100 tracks on Spotify, and it's number 11 in the history of Spotify. So definitely way up there. So what makes the song work? So clearly, when a song is extremely popular, it's not necessarily just the mix that did it, right? However, the mix didn't get in the way. So we can learn some mixing lessons by analyzing the song together and hearing what works about it. But also, it'll give us some insights into how to write songs or how to have a marketing strategy, if you're interested in that, that allows your music to be heard over long periods of time, that allow you to have what this track is. This track is arguably the biggest sleeper hit in history. A song that wasn't a huge hit when it first came out, but over a grueling, more than a year period, wore its way up to the top of the charts and then stayed there for almost another year. How does a song get to be that big of a hit? How does it get to be that enduring of a hit? What can we learn in the process of songwriting, arrangement, mixing, which is our special focus, but also promotion and mixing and release strategy, which we'll look at secondarily? What plays into that kind of thing? If you have a song that you absolutely love, that you think should take off and hasn't taken off yet, are there things we can do to help it take off a year after it's come out? Maybe. And we'll look at ways that that could happen. All right, without any further yakking from me about this, the last thing I've got to give you is just the briefest shout out to our sponsors, because that's what makes this whole thing free to the public. If you want me to get right to the part where we listen to the track, bring up the frequency analyzer, start hearing tunes together, all you've got to do is hit the like button, leave a comment, hit subscribe, hit the notifications bell, all that good stuff. If you're on one of the audio-only versions of the podcast, consider giving us a 5-star rating and review. It really does help spread the word. Also, big shout out and thanks to our biggest sponsor, which is you. How do you sponsor this podcast? Not only with your likes and your love, but also check out one of our great full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified, Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs. They're all guaranteed to change the way you work forever for the better, guaranteed or your money back. Also, another great way to support yourself, I do one-on-one coaching calls. I master records for people. I've got gold and platinum mastering credits, so all that stuff. Also, we've got brand sponsors like Sound Toys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in the known universe. Try out anything they make for free for 30 days over at soundtoys.com. Also, big shout out and thanks this week to Focusrite, sponsoring this podcast. They make some killer entry-level interfaces and some killer high-end stuff. So a big shout out and thanks to those guys. We'll start off by just listening to this track, and a little way in, I'll start to pull up the frequency analyzer. You know what? Let's pull up the frequency analyzer right from the beginning. And I'm going to play fast and loose here. I'm going to share my entire screen with you. So is my personal bank account information going to come up? My most embarrassing emails? Let's find out as we go into complete and total screen share, because this will allow me to bring up SPL's Hawkeye. So for those of you who are on the audio and video version of this podcast, you can look at what's happening in the song as well as hearing it. All right, let's bring it up. Without further ado, Heat Waves by Glass Animals. Here it is from the top.
Last night, all I think about is you. Don't stop, baby, you can walk too. Don't want, baby, think about you. You know that I'm never gonna lose.
we'll get back into listening to some more of the song. But what are some of the things that you notice? What are some of the things that stand out to you? I will give you my first big thing here. One of the reasons I brought this up is not just because it's a big hit, but because it has come up numerous times as a reference for my mastering clients, for my coaching call clients. People who are into this idea of making kind of alternative pop records will often reference this. It's one of the bigger references, along with M83 comes up a lot. And this one has just come up again and again in recent months, possibly because we just passed through the middle of June, which this song is about to a degree. So what is it that makes this not only a big pop hit, but a favorite among producery people who are using it as a reference? Now, there's obvious tricks that happen again and again in music production. And this one uses one of the oldest and most obvious tricks in the books. And it's one of the oldest, most obvious tricks in the book because it works so well. And so many of the tracks that we've analyzed in this mixed breakdown series, where producer guys really love these tracks, they are almost always the tracks that do this trick in the beginning. What trick is it? The start off with really thin, tinny, telephone-y sounding intro, and then the whole track drops, and then the whole track sounds huge because of it, because of contrast. This happened in another producer's favorite, Britney Spears' Toxic. It happened in another producer's favorite that we analyzed here recently, Tame Impala, The Less I Know, The Better, had an intro like that. There's a whole bunch of them. I can't even think of all of them at the top of my head. There's probably been at least 4 tracks that we've done in this mixed breakdown series that all employ this trick, but they all employ it slightly differently. One of the other things that's going on here that is similar to and different from the last track we analyzed is there's a lot of little scene changes happening, but this track lets you stay on a scene a little bit longer. I'll get into what that means in just a second. But the contrast between each of these scenes is huge, and that's part of what's giving it its forward momentum. I'll get into the idea of scene changes and what I mean by that more specifically in just a second. But first, let's just analyze this intro, what's happening in it from the moment the track starts to the moment that the kick and the 808 first drop together. What exactly is the character of this intro? And I'm going to look at the second timer as we're talking. Here we go.
Last night, all I think about is you. Don't stop, baby, you come on too. Don't baby, think about you. You know that I have all gonna lose.
So that intro, it's so small, but how does it stay compelling enough for us to get all the way to the first hit? Well, a few things happen. This is cut into, I would say 3 parts, but kind of 2 halves. So we have this beginning intro is established. Then very quickly a few seconds later, after intro is established, we get vocal entrance. So we've had our first pattern interrupt. Not quite a scene change yet, but we've added a new character to the scene. And then halfway through this intro, we add another figure, which are these stereo sound effects. So we have this really mono-sounding intro, which is going to make this is a super wide track, but it's going to make the super wide track sound even wider because this track starts out in mono. But to give us a taste of that coming halfway through the intro, we start to introduce these sound effects that are in stereo that you could almost miss. Look at it and listen to it with me at the same time on the frequency analyzer to see what's going on here on our spectrogram. To see what's going on with our left to right balance. So right now, totally mono. Vocal enters. Stereo effects added. Drop. Now, this song has a huge kick drum sound and a huge bass sound, but they're made to sound even huger by having really no low end in the intro. It's the same thing with the width that you're going to experience in this track, especially when you get to the chorus. This track is super wide. You look at this thing on the stereo correlation meter, and it is like way out there. This is as wide as mixes get, but even that is enhanced further by this intro. Let's keep on going and listen through from where the drums drop to our first chorus. Tell me what you notice here in the mix. Cool. So right before that chorus drops, we have this pre-chorus section. It's almost like a bridge. It's a different section that never appears again in the entire song. So this is a slightly more creative artist where they have a section that just does not repeat. I don't think this comes back at the end. And man, what a weird vocal sound. And how loud that vocal sound is in the mix. So this is one of the other things about Glass Animals, and this track in particular, is how bold they are with making certain creative decisions and how unafraid they are of making things sound weird and having exaggerated contrast. This song is an exercise in exaggerated contrast. This song is mixed loud in general. Like we see it here on the Lufs meter reaching -6 integrated loudness. That's loud. But if you listen to this intro, the intro is like -30 and -20. It's in that area. So it is an absurdly quiet intro. And this is another thing that will shock listeners into actually hearing the song and paying attention. It's this irony of the volume automation that we have today, that you can have songs with extremely quiet sections, and that can actually help your track sound louder for a couple of reasons. Number one, if I take a track that is just mastered to -7 LUFS, and it's -7 LUFS for the entire thing, and it'll get turned down from -7 to -14. It'll get turned down by 7 dB. However, if I have a track that has loud sections that are like -6, -5 LUFS, but I can take down the integrated loudness, integrated loudness of that track overall by having just one section that's super quiet, maybe two sections that are super quiet, that will bring down our integrated LUFS rating. So now that our track it's still, say, -6 or -5 in the loudest sections. But since we have a couple of sections that are -20 and -30, that can bring down the overall integrated loudness so the track doesn't get turned down as much on streaming services. This is one of these weird things where the loudness wars now being fought involve dynamics. Yes, the loudest sounding tracks will still have sections that are mastered extremely loud and mixed extremely loud. But to get those sections to sound super loud, you've actually got to put some quiet sections into your mix to bring down the average level of the mix overall. Because now the integrated loudness, which is a measurement of the loudness of the whole song averaged out over the whole thing, when that gets lower, your louder sections will sound louder than they otherwise would. Let me see if I can say this one more time to make make sense for you in loudness. Imagine you have a track that is -5 half the time and -10 half the time. Put that track together. This is very rough. It won't be exactly this, but the integrated loudness is now -7.5. So it is going to get turned down something like 6.5 dB. Meanwhile, if you had mastered the whole track to just be -5 all the time, now to get to -14 is going to get turned down by 9 dB. So the track that was mastered louder, which is loud consistently, might get turned down more than a track which has sections that are just as loud, but is more dynamic overall. So that's one of the things that's happening here that makes this track leap out of speakers at people and make it sound impressive, is that we have this quiet section that allows us to turn the whole track up. But also, in addition to that, you're listening to a playlist. This track comes up in the playlist. All of a sudden, you don't really know what's going on. Like there's a lull in your playlist. Maybe you're driving, or you're doing the dishes, or you're cooking, or you're going for a jog, or you're at a party, whatever it is. And there's this lull in the playlist, this almost quiet, non-existent point in the playlist you're listening to, because this is how a lot of people listen these days, either in playlists or even on randomized functions. So there's this lull, and then all of a sudden it goes from lull to banger, super loud. All of a sudden you notice the track that's coming on. This is another reason why this trick works. Not only does it make the rest of the track sound better in comparison to the beginning of the track, but it also makes it stand out on playlists. It makes the loud sections of this track sound louder than what was happening before. In part because of this gamifying of the level, but also in part because of the lull that might happen in a playlist. And then you're shocked back into hearing things again. All right, I'm talking so much on it, but there's so much to unpack just in these first 30, 40 seconds. Let's listen again to this section with this really deep vocal. Would you know how to get this vocal effect if you wanted to? Let's listen to that and hear exactly what's going on in this pre-chorus section. Ton of low end. 60 and 70. Beautiful little pause there before the chorus drops. But this is like formant shifting that's going on here, right? So you can get this kind of sound by pitching down a vocal, but usually this to me sounds like more than just pitching down a vocal while keeping the timing the same. It is probably pitching down the vocal with some formant shifting applied. If you know the idea of formant shifting, it's, male and female vocals have different tonality to them. A female vocal playing the same note as a male vocal, the female vocal will sound more like a flute. It will have fewer harmonics, and the harmonics that it has will be more purely related to the fundamental note. So if the female singer is singing an A880, we're going to hear a lot of those doublings of it. What would it be? 1760 and 3520 and 7040. Those frequencies up. This is me doing math in real time. My goodness. The female vocal will have more of those kind of pure harmonics and fewer of them and a lower proportion of them, where a male voice is going to tend to have more harmonics and more kind of dirty harmonics, ones that aren't as purely related to the fundamental. And in some of these kind of vocal processing tools that allow you to mess around with vocals, like the Baby Audio Humanoid that we just messed around with last week on the channel, you can skew things more towards a male format. And I think that might be happening here in addition to just pitch shifting this vocal down. There might be some of this formant shifting that's doing that kind of thing with the harmonics, but also just how crazy loud this background vocal is. It is not uncommon in pop records to mix background vocals wide and upfront. And this has been popular now for 10 to 20 years in pop records easily. And this really takes that aesthetic and pushes it even further. All right, having talked about that, let's drop into the chorus. And this is really the payoff of the song. Let's hear what's happening there. So wide.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He always been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He always been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Usually I put something on TV.
Cool. So in this chorus, one of the hooks is not just the melodic hook here, but the vocal timbre hook. I thought something really interesting. If you want to check out this song and analyze it in more detail, just as a song, there's a performance you can find of just the singer and the guitar player doing a live rendition of this song, where it strips out all the production elements. And what the vocalist ends up doing in this chorus is he does this vocal swoop where it goes from normal register up to falsetto register. And he does that manually. And what he's doing with just one voice live is he swoops back and forth between the main vocal line, which is in the normal register, and then this harmonized vocal line, which is in the falsetto register. In this track, there's not like one vocal doing that, that's shifting back and forth between normal register and falsetto. There are two different takes, two different tracks that are doing that. But he's actually a good enough singer that he can switch between those two voices live and make it feel really seamless. But that vocal blend and getting that this is the point of this section, and the whole entire section revolves around a couple of things. It revolves around the vocal, particularly the shift in emphasis between the main natural vocal line and the falsetto vocal line. This swooping feel. I mean, this is like the hook to the song. The hook is not just melodic. It's this textural hook. So that's number one thing. And then probably the number two thing in this mix, if I had to go my tier list of what's A tier, what's B tier, and what's C tier in this mix, B tier here is probably our kick and bass, which are almost joined together as one. There is a kind of a kick and an 808, two different low frequency sounds that sometimes blend together and sometimes don't. So you'll hear that there's a synthetic-y 808-y kicky sound, this round, bulbous, deeper sound, and then on top of it, this kind of knockier kick, which plays a slightly busier pattern, but most of the time they play in unison. And that kick, followed by the hi-hat and the snare that go along with it. Like, that's the whole point of the song, is this rhythm section and that change between falsetto and the main vocal, kind of going back and forth, this swooping feel. And the mixer here gets this 100% right. And how does he draw our attention to the right things? Well, first of all, I'll tell you who the mixer is. It's Manny Marroquin. And it's not just Manny Marroquin, it's Manny Marroquin plus someone else. I think I have it pulled up here. What was Chris Galland, who's a younger mixing engineer over there at Larrabee, which is Manny's studio. I think Chris mixed a bunch of the records, this record, and then Manny came in for some of the tracks where Chris was credited as mixing engineer, and then Manny was credited as mixer, I think, if you actually look at the real liner notes. So this is a Manny mix. And one of the things that Manny Marroquin is not afraid to do is to dirty up things like kick drums and 808s. And I want you to listen just to how much grit there is on this kick, both before the chorus and in the chorus and during the verses. He is not afraid to A, make this kick drum super loud. B, he's not afraid to make it like surprisingly resonant. There's so much low end in this kick, around 60, 70 hertz. There's this huge hump you'll see in the frequency analyzer. And he's not afraid to have a whole bunch of dirt on this kick drum in the mid-range. Manny is absolutely brilliant in making things sound like they're going to explode, or like they have exploded your speakers. And particularly, he's good at that on things like kick drums. He just finds somewhere in the mid-range to add a whole bunch of dirt and distortion to the kick, so it sounds like it's rattling the muffler off of a Jeep, you know? You don't just get the throb of the low end. You get the throb of the low end plus the entire car that the low end is in being rattled. But you don't have to actually rattle the car to do it, because it's baked in to the sound, and you'll get that kind of speaker rattling sound on a small set of speakers. We could even go in here and carve out some low frequency. Hey, I have an equalizer I can bring up. We'll just roll off some 100 hertz as we go along and tell me how the kick sounds to you, even after we get rid of the lows. That character in the kick and the presence of the kick is still going to be maintained. Let's do that as we listen to it from right around here. Look at all the 60, 70 hertz, 80 hertz.
Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Usually I put something.
Unfortunately, I'm realizing that the EQ moves I'm making here aren't actually getting through to the output playback, so you're not hearing these EQ moves. So I'll have to figure out how to make sure that that's happening on my Spotify stuff in future streams. But at the very least, you can see on the frequency analyzer physically just how much is going on around 60 or 70. And we get rid of these lows. I really don't think you're going to lose the kick drum pattern. All right, going from the chorus into the verse, let's think about what some of our changes are and how vocal effects are being handled. Such wide vocals in the chorus, right?
He ways been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June. He ways been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Usually I put something on TV, so we never think about you and me. But today I see our reflections clearly in Hollywood, laying on the screen. You just need a better life than this. You need something I can never give. Fake water all across the road. It's gone now, the night is come. But sometimes all I think about is you.
Man, Homeboy is actually a good singer. He is actually good at being expressive. He's not just good at singing, he's good at storytelling. His pitch control, I've heard him without autotune, is actually good. And he really is looking for like an actor-like performance. And this is one thing, if you're not doing enough of this as a singer in your own productions, or if you're working with singers, one of the biggest things as a producer you can encourage singers to do is to sing more like an actor or to sing more like an actress. Like, this is not just delivering the performance. This is delivering the performance of the song, plus figuring out how to put an emotional spin on the lyric, how to make things slightly more exaggerated. I mean, everything in a production like this is exaggerated. The color scheme for Glass Animals makes so much sense. Like, you see these bright purples and pinks being the color scheme for this record. I mean, that's what this record is sonically. Things are cartoonish, and he has almost a cartoonish approach to his vocal delivery in the verse. One of the interesting things that happens here, though, that I think really is exciting about this mix and makes this mix work, is we don't lose vocal level going from the chorus to the verse. When we go from the chorus to the verse, the vocal stays like almost the same loudness. It's just now a single vocal instead of like a vocal synthesizer made of maybe 6 or 8 vocal parts coming together. I don't know exactly how many doubles he has in the chorus, but my guess would be something like 4 to 8 is a good guess for starters. But when we come out of the chorus into the verse, this verse vocal really is exceptionally loud and upfront. It is definitely our A-tier element in the chorus, and then the single vocal is our A-tier element in the verse. It is mixed like a pop record. Let's hear that transition one more time.
So we never think about you and me, but all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June, he waves been faking me out. Can't make you happier now. Usually I put something on TV, so we never think about you and me.
Like, it almost seems like the vocal is getting louder because now a single vocal is just as loud as a whole choir was before. Now, interesting thing here, some other mixed decisions. What are the biggest things in this vocal? A-tier for me on this track is vocals and kick drum. Kick drum / 808. So vocal and our bottom end percussive elements, that is A-tier in this track for me. So it's almost mixed like a hip hop record in that respect. B-tier is like kind of everything else in the drum kit. Maybe the hi-hat is pretty high up there. And then the snare drum. And then the thing that's like way in the bottom of B tier is actually the most essential instrument in the song from a harmonic perspective and from a songcraft perspective is the guitar. They have this like very chorused out, slightly stereo sounding guitar pattern. And this guitar pattern stays really similar in the verse and chorus. It does not change that dramatically. We don't have conventional rock and roll songwriting structure here, which like, here's the guitar riff for the verse, and here's our totally different guitar riff for the chorus. It's like, no, the guitar stays as like almost this constant backdrop throughout the song. It has the same feel throughout, but it's at such a lower tier than some of the other elements. It's really allowed to be dwarfed. And if you listen to the performance of the song is super stripped down, that's just vocals and guitar, I'd encourage you to do that if you like the song as a song, just to hear how much of the song structure is actually just the guitar and vocal, and how much the production is adding to it. Because I would say 2 minutes into the stripped down version of the song, it's like, wow, that guy can actually sing. There's actually a decent song here. But there's no way I think you could sustain this song as written for 4 minutes, which is how long it is, based on just guitar and vocals. Like, production is 100% a part of the whole point of this song. Now, I think I want to start turning my attention, because this brings me to the fact that what happens in the song, each chorus, there isn't like a huge build from chorus to chorus. Each verse is really a pretty unique performance. I encourage you to listen to the whole rest of the song yourself. But there is a lot of repetition in this song. And I think this is one of the things among many that helped it become a hit, is the fact that it hammers you over the head with a really palatable but unique and weird chorus again and again. And one of the things that made the song a hit, one of the ways it took off, was becoming basically a TikTok meme song. So let's talk about how the song was released, what made it successful, and maybe we'll listen to a little bit more of the mix and make some more notes on it. But we're already, my goodness, how long into this? 30 minutes into the stream, and I want to make some notes on the idea of how a song can take so long to take off and then become so incredibly big. So I was reading actually an article about, I read a whole bunch of articles about the song and how it got to where it is. And I think the one to me that was the most salient, gave 5 major points to what made the song big. Let me see if I can pull that up for you here on the screen, and I'll give you my notes on it. One sec as I grab this and find a way to put it on my screen. One more sec. Here we go. So I think this is a really interesting thing to look at as far as actual trends for hits today. All right, let me bring back up the screen share. Here we go. So this is from an article on Billboard. And they were the author of this article is trying to give an analysis of why it took this song so long. I think it was 59 weeks to get to number 1, the longest build up to number 1 in the history of Billboard, going back to the 1950s, 1958 or something like that. And this is now the longest lasting track on the Billboard 100 in 91 weeks, or was it 92 weeks? It beat out, I think recently, the most streamed song of all time, which is Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. So, number 1 thing they give is that it took the alternative to pop crossover route. So Billboard does have different charts. It has a chart for, alternative, and a chart for rock, and a chart for hip hop, and a chart for country. And that has the, the Hot 100, like the pop charts hits. And this one started off like not being a track that was played on pop radio stations and wasn't making it a pop playlist because it wasn't classified as pop yet. It was classified as like indie or alternative or whatever, and it was on those charts. And tracks that do that generally take a longer time to get to the top of the chart. So that was one thing that they were saying. This one, I think, is important and big to recognize. Longer top 100 endurance in the 2010s. So we've been seeing in the 2020s. So we've been seeing this trend since 2020, now going back the past 4 years, of tracks staying on the charts longer. It doesn't particularly say why, but it is saying that tracks have been staying longer in the top 100 than in the past. So there was a 90-week run for the song Blinding Lights from 2019 to 2021. Heat Waves is up there, but Dua Lipa's Levitating. This one comes up as a reference a lot, too, for clients. 69 weeks. Ariana Grande's Save Your Tears was on the charts for 61 weeks. So this is different than in the past. And why is that? We'll talk about that more in just a second. The number 3 reason they give here is this whole idea of virality breeding more virality. Once something starts to take off on a place like TikTok or Instagram or in YouTube or in YouTube Shorts, and people start memifying songs, when others see one person memify a song in a way, then that kind of becomes like, oh, that's a song I can pull into my memes. It had the emotional effect that I wanted. It had the emotional effect that I want. In their memes, they got the emotional effect they wanted. That's the emotional effect I want. I'm just going to pull this song in. And you've seen how long memes have gone around. If you've ever shared memes, you have probably shared memes that are 10 years old and are still making the rounds. In fact, there's old memes about memes being around for a long time. It's an older meme, sir, but it still checks out. That kind of thing. Once something becomes memeified, man, I mean, its endurance increases dramatically, because it becomes a stand-in for other ideas. There's one song I think that exemplifies this. Have you ever heard of a song called Little Dark Age? Who's that by? Little Dark Age. Is it Management? Yeah, it is Management. Or MGMT. Do you say Management or do you say MGMT? Little Dark Age, that's the song that has been memeified. I first saw it on some what's the word for it? Like male empowerment YouTube channels, where I remember seeing these shorts of these videos about where people are just talking about how toxic men are and how terrible it is to be a man and men are awful and all this stuff. And then the song Little Dark Age comes on and it's like slowed down to half speed. And on top of it is just footage of men running into burning buildings and carrying out people and saving them. And like men spelunking down on a bridge to like save a puppy from a torrent of river below, or, men doing all these heroic acts. And there's this juxtaposition between some of the other ones were like, oh, getting fit is silly, love your body however it is. And then it's people doing like amazing feats, like a guy in a wheelchair doing pull-ups to the song Little Dark Age right after some, body positivity stuff. So I've seen this track memified. And that kind of memification, once a song, like, it's like, okay, there's a thing that we can do with the song now. And that happened to this track. I believe the singer in this band was recounting a story where the first time he got shared a meme, it was a meme of someone eating their salad. And they look really sad. And then the song drops and they're looking across the street to like a fast food restaurant that they wish that they were eating at. And, there's this background lyric of how I miss you in long summer nights. So there's a memey way to use this song. So this is something I think that we could potentially learn from in our own tracks. What if you could memify your own tracks? Like, here's a release strategy. A lot of people are trying to figure out how to make shorts and Instagram reels and things like that featuring themselves as the artist. And I think that's totally a valid thing to do. Like, people ultimately connect not just with the music, but connect with the person making the music. That's 100% a thing that happens, and 100% part of an effective marketing strategy, for lack of a better word, a way to get your music heard, because that's all that marketing really is. But man, what if you could do the exact opposite? What if you could be like, hey man, I'm going to take my song because my song is the soundtrack to X. And I'm just going to make a whole bunch of shorts, videos where I'm going to, how other people are reusing my music? I'm going to flip the script. I'm going to reuse other people's videos. I'm going to take some really interesting or inspiring or unusual videos that all fit a theme. And I'm going to make a whole series of those videos, and the soundtrack to them is my song. Man, here's a free piece of advice for you. I don't know why I haven't seen people really do this yet, but that would be such a 21st century way to actually market your music and get it heard. Not just yet another video of, hey, my song's coming out, here's me lip syncing along to my song. That's great. But what if your song really is the soundtrack to men rescuing babies from burning buildings? Or what if your song really is the soundtrack to like the joy of watching a child grow up? Or your song really is the soundtrack to the feeling when you, like, all the ice cream falls off of your ice cream cone and you're super depressed about it. And you could create a whole bunch of reels or shorts that are like addictive videos that have your equally addictive song playing behind it. Is that a way that you could flip the script, and instead of people who make videos using your song to give their videos an edge, what if you're a person who makes songs and you're remixing good videos that are out there to give your song an edge? How come this isn't something that artists are doing? Why am I the first person that I know of to think of this and say this out loud, like right now as we're doing this stream? It's occurring to me like at this moment. I've watched a lot of advice on how you should get your music heard, and no one has said this so far that I've heard. Go do it and tell me how it turns out for you, because if you do that well, I have no doubt that that could work. All right, let's go back to the rest of what Billboard is saying about why this one took a little while to blow up. I want to go back to number 2. So I went deep into number 3. Let me go deeper into number 2. The longer endurance in the 2020s. Why is that? Well, I think there's a couple reasons. One of the reasons is that back in the day, when we had like the Beatles having, 18 different number 1 hits, which all stayed in the charts for a very short period of time. Like, this is very different, right? Because if the Beatles were around right now, they've never had a song, the Beatles, that was, on the charts for 91 weeks on the top 100. That's just not how it worked. The Beatles would have one song on the charts, and then another song of theirs would come on. It would kind of start to knock the first one off the charts, and then by the time that one was starting to dwindle, another of their songs would come onto the charts, and they had another one hot on the heels of that, and there was this constant rotation of, oh man, that was the Beatles song from 3 months ago. There's a new one out now. So why isn't it that way today? Well, I think that when we don't have a unified media, right? A media where just all of the different channels are pointing at the same thing at the same time, it is harder to get the focus of all media on one thing all at the same time. And it's harder to get these amplification effects where everything's happening at once. That's part one. But part two, and this is totally different, is that people, human beings, have less in-person, person-to-person interaction with each other than ever before. If you're my age, I'm 42, and you grew up listening to records, you'd hear about new records. Usually, the way most people got into new records was through their friends. Like maybe their friends made them a mixtape, or they went over to their friend's house and heard a new record. That was even more so in the before tape cassettes, in the earlier 80s and in the 70s and the 60s. It's like, I went over to my friend's house and they got this new record and I want to have that new record at home too. So that's another reason that things are staying on the charts for longer periods, because it takes a longer time for the word to spread. And the Beatles might have been able to get 20% of pop music fans to hear their song like in the first week that it came out. Totally possible. For an artist like Glass Animals to get 20% of the possible pop music fans out there to hear their song, that is not going to happen the first week that it's out. There's not a chance. Even though we have the internet where potentially information is faster than ever before, the middleman's been cut out, we don't have to ship things across the country. Yeah, but its attention is so fragmented that it can take a much longer time until everyone's heard the song and been worn out on it. So that's another aspect of it. But also, there's less of a reason to immediately check something out right now if you're not person to person with another human being in the same room experiencing music with them. Like, that is a big catalyst to go, I'm checking this out now. But if the only way you hear about new music is like secondhand through social media, not in direct person-to-person connection, direct person-to-person contact, and you're hearing about third hand, like someone didn't give you this song to listen to, someone didn't invite you personally over to their house to hear this song, you heard about it third hand from a friend, and it's like, oh yeah, that's another post, whatever, that's another post, and not until like the third or fourth time this song comes up in your feed might you be like, oh, I guess I'll check out this song now. It's come up enough. I guess it's not going away. Now I'll go listen to it. I think that's more the way people experience things. But also the metrics are different. Because back in the day, it would have been radio is playing the song a whole bunch right now because it's new, and that's our excuse for playing it. And a whole bunch of people are buying it right now. They might listen to it for the next 9 months if they really like the record, but they only buy it one time. Now with streaming, if someone likes a song enough and they want to listen to it over the course of 9 months, it'll be on their playlist. They're listening to the song for 9 months and it'll keep on being replayed again and again and again, collecting streams, plays on Spotify, on YouTube. The algorithm sees that's being spun again and again and again. So it stays in the charts because it's a song that actually people have enjoyed listening to again and again. So you have songs staying up there longer, songs that are interesting enough, they make into playlists and they stay there until they've expired and people have gotten fed up with them. So that's another reason they're staying on there longer. I would say the lack of person-to-person connection, the lack of unity in media, and the playlistification of music, where people aren't buying the record once and that's how it shows up in the chart. They're listening to it many times over a long period of time, so they're staying on the charts. Some of the other things that they mention here, the virality, breeding further virality. The idea, this says it's a slow burner. It's not a pop scorcher. So it's more a slowly enveloping temperature shift. I don't know if the up-tempo to down-tempo aspect of songs is going to make them stay on a playlist longer or shorter. I don't know. Is there something to that? Do down-tempo songs stay on the charts longer than up-tempo songs? I'd have to do an analysis to know that for sure. Maybe that's true. I don't know. Maybe people get danced out to up-tempo songs sooner. I have no idea. But they don't really seem to give good evidence that that's the case. This more seems like musing to me. And this number 5, this is big. Lack of new major competition. When you drop a record in 2020, in the midst of the entire world being shut down and a lot of projects not being completed, all of a sudden, like, yeah, if you're one of the few hits that are out there in 2020, you have less competition for a while because fewer people are getting to the studio and collaborating with each other compared to before. So I think that those are some of the lessons we can learn about why songs in general are going longer and why this one in particular is going longer. I mean, this song was dropped, I believe, right before the whole world went into like lockdown mode, and, you know, governments were forcing people to stay at home, and a lot of people were just afraid to be around their friends. So probably a lot of big budget records got put on hold. They're like, let's release this later after this whole thing is blown over, I hope. So yeah, less competition. That is potentially a factor. But I've got to say, the factors for me that make it work as a standout, interesting production are just how fearless and interesting they are with some really basic ideas around vocal arrangement, writing, and production. This big, melting sounding vocal in the beginning, that's weird enough already to grab someone's attention and to make them keep on listening to the song and to listen to it twice. That's enough. But then this kind of unique swooping between normal register and falsetto that happens in the chorus, that alone is enough to grab someone's attention and make them consider listening to the song twice.
Happier now. Sometimes all I think about is you. Late nights in the middle of June.
Right? It's like the middle of the phrase where we go into falsetto, and not only are we changing like the texture and the timbre right in the middle of the phrase, but the whole vocal gets louder in the middle of the phrase. There's this really like undulating seesaw feeling in here. Some of the dynamics they work into the arrangement, even though once the drums drop, this song is pretty much just like pegged to -6 or -7 LUFS the entire time. There's not that much actual level dynamics, but there's enough textural dynamics and harmonic dynamics to make this song kind of interesting and engaging and surprising. So I would say this is definitely one of those cases where production, even more so than songwriting, is one of the things that sold the song and made it work. Is there a decent song underneath it? Yes. Was I surprised at how well the song translated, if you keep it short, to just vocal and guitar? Yeah, I actually was. But would it have done what it did without all the production around it? No. Would it have done what it did without getting placed into a big television show, into a big fanfic thing around a big video game, and then becoming the kind of song that serves as the soundtrack to video, with short video being one of the main ways that music is propagated today? So one of the last ideas I want to give you around short video content and how you can use it to bolster what you do, because that's part of what made this song big. Part of what made it big is there's, you know, young people who heard this through movies and video games they like. That's part of it. But then young people reusing this music after hearing it in video games and TV shows that they like, and it being reusable in that way. One of the last things I'll say about listening to the singer and songwriter here, an interview he gave that I thought was interesting. He was talking about, for a while, walking around and listening to John Williams scores in his headphones while he was doing things like grocery shopping, and how listening to John Williams scores made everything sound so dramatic, right? That you'd be grocery shopping, you'd pick up an onion, and it would be like the most important onion ever, right? Because you're listening to the theme to Jurassic Park as you pick up your onion and you're sorting through your onions. And that being something that he wanted to achieve with the song, like, hey, this song should be the soundtrack to X. And if you want to go that route of having other people reuse your song in their videos, or if you want to go the route of taking really interesting video from other sources and using that to promote your song, thinking in that way of this song is the soundtrack to X. Fill in the blank of what X is and write a song to that prompt, and then produce the song to that prompt. That would be a way for you to potentially tap into at least the potential for virality that you might not already be getting. So take that as a prompt, use it. This song is the soundtrack to X, fill in the blank with what it's going to be, and either you or other people can use it in that way. And this is a band where, you know, even if you're not into thinking that having 3 billion streams and being a top 10 streamed song of all time is the thing for your kind of band, well, that wasn't the kind of thing that Glass Animals would be expected to do in the past either. Their next biggest hit after this does not have 3 billion streams. It has, does it have 300 million maybe? Like 1/10 this amount? Yeah, 351 million, the song Gooey, totally different. Some of the other songs that are in their top 5 songs here have 23 million streams, 12 million streams, and their other shot at having a big top 40 kind of hit, 150 million streams. But they're a band that, has albums that people genuinely like, and their fans like the deep cuts. If you find a Glass Animals fan, and they do exist, Heat Waves is not their favorite song. Take a Slice is not their favorite song. Gooey is not their favorite song. These big songs are not their favorite songs. This is a band that has an actual fan base of people who like them and listen to their deep cuts, and they say to themselves, hey, to make this sustainable, at least once an album, we've got to try to do at least one thing that has a chance of having farther ranging success, because that's going to allow us to live more comfortably. And it could be a fun puzzle to work on. So if you're the kind of artist who isn't doing stuff that's super accessibly pop, rather than trying to do it all the time, sometimes put all of your eggs into one basket and really say, what if I was to go more pop with this? What if I did just one track that went super pop and was the soundtrack to X? Do you have it in you to try that and still make a song that you actually like and that others might like? So that'd be my advice and encouragement to you today. If you have found this podcast episode useful, I would strongly encourage you to sponsor this podcast by sponsoring yourself. Check out one of our full-length courses like Mixing Breakthroughs, Compression Breakthroughs, EQ Breakthroughs, Mastering Demystified. All of them are guaranteed to change the way that you work forever, for the better, or your money back. I've got to say, I get all sorts of stunning before and afters after people take these courses. I get to hear how their mixes sound beforehand. I get to hear how their mixes sound afterwards. And it really does transform the way people change. Excuse me, I've been talking for like almost an hour now, so I messed that up. It really does transform the way that people mix. It changes the way people mix forever, for the better. Also, check out some of our branded sponsors, like, who have we got today? Sound Toys, making some of my favorite creative mixing effects in my own universe. Try out anything they make for 30 days for free over at soundtoys.com. Also, big shout out and thanks to Focusrite, making some truly great interfaces. They just came out with a new version of their Scarlett interfaces. This is, I believe, like the best-selling interface of all time, and for very good reason. They're super inexpensive, super portable, and super good sounding. So, man, I want to say these guys have been like 20 years making the best entry-level interfaces. If you need one, definitely check it out. But if you're into the high-end stuff, all the way up into their Red range, I mean, these are some of the best interfaces out there. Their Claret, their Octopre, super useful for studios, especially project studios. Check these guys out, Focusrite.com. Big thanks for hanging out with me. This has been Justin Colletti of the SonicScoop Podcast. I will see you next time.